I watched my mother's face turn red as she pointed at the door and told me I had 24 hours to get out of the house I grew up in, and in that moment, something inside me cracked clean in half. Not from sadness, but from the sudden, blinding clarity that she had never actually seen me as anything more than a disappointment wrapped in her DNA. My name is Abigail Turner. I'm 34 years old, and this is how I learned that blood doesn't guarantee loyalty, and sometimes the people who hurt you the most are the ones who gave you life. It started on a Tuesday in March. One of those gray Seattle mornings where the rain feels less like weather and more like a mood, and I was sitting at the kitchen table with my laptop open, responding to emails from 3 different potential clients while my coffee went cold in its mug. I had been living back at home in Ballard for 8 months. Not because I wanted to, but because my apartment lease ended right when my freelance graphic design business hit a rough patch. 3 major clients ghosted me within 2 weeks, and suddenly I was choosing between paying rent or eating. Mom had offered her spare bedroom with what seemed like genuine warmth back then, told me it was temporary, told me family helps family, but I should have known better because my mother, Patricia Turner, had always been the kind of woman who kept score of every favor like an accountant tracking debts. The house was a modest craftsman on a quiet street lined with cherry trees, built in 1952, with creaky hardwood floors and a kitchen that hadn't been updated since the Clinton administration. It was worth about $450,000 in Seattle's inflated market, and Mom owned it outright after Dad died 6 years ago, and the life insurance paid off the mortgage. She worked as an office manager at a dental clinic downtown, brought home about $55,000 a year, and spent most of her free time complaining about money while somehow always managing to afford her weekly hair appointments and the premium cable package with every sports channel known to mankind. That Tuesday morning, I had just landed a contract with a local brewery to redesign their entire branding package, $15,000 up front with another $10,000 on completion, and I was feeling something close to hope for the first time in months. I was typing up the project timeline when Mom came into the kitchen still in her bathrobe, her hair in rollers, and I smiled at her, actually smiled, ready to share my good news. But before I could say anything, she looked at me with this expression of pure disgust. The kind of look you'd give a stranger who just cut in front of you in line, and she said, "You know, Abigail, I'm really getting tired of supporting your lifestyle." I blinked at her, my fingers frozen over the keyboard, trying to process what I'd just heard because the words didn't match anything happening in reality. "What are you talking about?" I asked, and my voice came out smaller than I wanted it to, already defensive, already shrinking. She poured herself coffee with these sharp, aggressive movements, slamming the pot back onto the warmer, and when she turned to face me, her eyes were cold in a way that made my stomach drop. "I'm talking about the fact that you sit around all day on that computer pretending to work while I'm out there busting my back at a real job," she said, and each word felt like a slap. "You're 34 years old, Abigail. When are you going to grow up and get a real career instead of this freelance nonsense?" I felt heat crawl up my neck, that specific burning shame that only a parent can trigger. The kind that makes you feel like you're 12 years old again and failing. "Mom, I do work," I said, trying to keep my voice level, trying not to sound like I was begging for her approval. "I've been applying to full-time positions while building my client base. I just got a $15,000 contract this morning." She laughed, actually laughed, this short, sharp bark of disbelief, and said, $15,000? Congratulations, that's what? 3 months of actual salary at a real job? You've been here for 8 months, eating my food, using my electricity, my internet, my water, contributing nothing. The unfairness of it hit me like cold water because I had been contributing. I'd been buying groceries every week. I'd paid her $500 a month even when I could barely afford it. I'd cooked dinner most nights and done the majority of the housework while she watched television and complained about her coworkers. But none of that mattered in this moment because she had already decided I was worthless, and nothing I said was going to change the narrative she'd constructed in her head. "I've been paying you rent," I said quietly. "I've been helping around the house. I'm not just sitting around doing nothing." She waved her hand like she was swatting away a fly, dismissing everything I'd just said without even considering it. $500 doesn't even cover utilities, she said, which was a blatant lie because her utility bills were never more than $200 a month. "And doing dishes isn't a contribution. It's basic human decency." I felt something crack inside my chest, this physical sensation of something breaking, and I realized with sudden, horrible clarity that this wasn't about money or contribution or any practical concern. This was about her need to feel superior, her need to punish me for not living the life she thought I should be living, her need to hurt me because somewhere deep down she was disappointed that I wasn't the successful, corporate daughter she could brag about to her friends at the clinic. "What do you want me to do?" I asked, and I hated how my voice shook, hated that I was giving her the satisfaction of seeing me upset. She set her coffee cup down with a decisive thud and crossed her arms, and I saw the decision in her eyes before she even opened her mouth. Saw that she'd already made up her mind about this, probably days or weeks ago, and this confrontation was just her executing a plan she'd already committed to. "I want you out," she said, flat and final. "I want you to pack your things and find somewhere else to live. I'm done enabling this lazy lifestyle of yours." The word lazy hit me like a physical blow because I had been working 12, 14-hour days, juggling multiple projects, sending out dozens of job applications every week, doing everything I possibly could to get back on my feet, and she had watched all of it and somehow decided I was lazy. "You can't be serious," I said, standing up from the table, my chair scraping against the floor with this awful screech. "Mom, where am I supposed to go?" She shrugged, actually shrugged like we were discussing what to have for dinner and not her only daughter's immediate homelessness. "That's not my problem," she said. "You're an adult. Figure it out. I want you out by Thursday morning." 2 days. She was giving me 2 days to pack up my entire life and find somewhere to live in one of the most expensive cities in America, and the casual cruelty of it took my breath away. I stood there in that kitchen with its faded linoleum and the crack in the ceiling that had been there since I was 10. And I looked at the woman who raised me, who taught me how to ride a bike and helped me with my homework and held me when I cried after my first breakup, and I didn't recognize her. The person standing in front of me was a stranger wearing my mother's face, someone who could throw away their child like garbage without even a flicker of guilt. "I can't believe you're doing this," I said, and my voice came out barely above a whisper. "After everything I've been through. After Dad died and you said we only had each other. This is what you do." Her expression didn't change. Didn't soften even a fraction, and that was somehow worse than the anger, the complete absence of any maternal warmth or concern or basic human empathy. "Don't bring your father into this," she said sharply. "He would be ashamed of what you've become. A 34-year-old woman mooching off her mother instead of standing on her own 2 feet. That was the moment I knew there was no coming back from this. No repairing whatever fractured relationship we'd had before, because she had weaponized my dead father against me, used his memory to wound me in the deepest way possible, and that's not something you forgive. I went upstairs without another word, walked into the small bedroom that had been my sanctuary for 8 months, and started packing my things with mechanical precision, shoving clothes into suitcases and boxes into garbage bags because I didn't have proper moving supplies, and I refused to ask her for anything ever again. My hands were shaking, and my vision was blurred with tears I wouldn't let fall, and I called my friend Jennifer, who lived in Tacoma, explained the situation in a voice that didn't sound like mine, and she immediately offered her couch until I could find something permanent. I spent that night and the next day boxing up my entire life while Mom went to work and came home and watched television like nothing had happened, like she hadn't just destroyed her relationship with her only child, and by Wednesday evening, I had everything packed and loaded into my beat-up Honda Civic. I left the spare key on the kitchen counter, didn't say goodbye, didn't leave a note, just walked out of that house and told myself I would never set foot in it again. Living on Jennifer's couch in her tiny Tacoma apartment was humbling in ways I can't fully describe. Sleeping in her living room with her cat walking across my face at 3 a.m, hearing her and her boyfriend arguing through the thin walls, surviving on ramen and whatever freelance work I could scrape together. But something had shifted inside me, something fundamental, because the betrayal had burned away the part of me that needed my mother's approval, the part that kept trying to prove I was worthy of her love, and what was left was just cold, focused determination. I threw myself into work with an intensity that bordered on obsession, reaching out to old contacts, underbidding on projects just to build my portfolio, working 16-hour days until my eyes burned and my back ached. The brewery project went perfectly. They loved the rebrand so much they referred me to 3 other businesses, and suddenly I had more work than I could handle. Within 3 months, I moved into my own studio apartment in Capitol Hill, nothing fancy, just a 500-square-foot box with a Murphy bed and a view of a brick wall, but it was mine. I was paying for it myself, and that felt like victory. I hired a business consultant with some of my earnings, learned how to market myself properly, raised my rates to what I was actually worth instead of what I thought people would pay, and by month 6, my income had tripled. I brought on a junior designer to help with overflow work, then another, and before I knew it, I had a small agency with 5 employees and a client roster that included some of Seattle's biggest companies. 1 year after Mom kicked me out, I was making more money than I ever had in my life, living in a nice 1-bedroom in Fremont with actual furniture instead of milk crates and optimism, and I should have been happy, should have felt vindicated, but every success was tinged with this bitter taste because the person who should have celebrated with me was the person who had thrown me away. I didn't contact her during that year, didn't call on her birthday or Mother's Day or Christmas, and she didn't reach out either, which told me everything I needed to know about how little I'd actually mattered to her. Jennifer told me through mutual friends that Mom had been asking around about me, apparently surprised that I'd cut her off completely, apparently expecting me to come crawling back eventually to apologize for my laziness. The audacity of it would have been funny if it wasn't so painful. Then in February, almost exactly a year after she'd kicked me out, I got a call from my cousin Derek, who still lived in Ballard. "Hey, Abby," he said, and his voice had this weird tentative quality that immediately put me on alert. "Have you talked to your mom lately?" I was at my office, reviewing designs on my dual monitor setup, and I minimized the window to focus on the call. "No," I said flatly. "Why?" He hesitated, and I could hear him breathing, working up to something. "She's in some kind of financial trouble," he finally said. "She's been calling around asking family members for loans. Sounds pretty desperate." I felt absolutely nothing in that moment. No concern, no worry, just this blank emptiness where familial obligation should have been. "That's unfortunate," I said, my voice perfectly neutral. "But I don't see how that concerns me." Derek cleared his throat uncomfortably. "Come on, Abby. She's your mom. Whatever happened between you two, she obviously needs help." I laughed, this short, bitter sound that surprised even me. "She kicked me out with 2 days' notice and called me lazy after I'd been working myself to death trying to get back on my feet," I said. "She told me her problems weren't mine, so now mine aren't hers. Seems fair." But after we hung up, curiosity got the better of me, and I did what any person with internet access and unresolved parental issues would do. I started digging. It didn't take long to figure out what had happened. Mom had refinanced the house about 3 years ago, taken out a home equity line of credit for $60,000 that she'd apparently blown through on God knows what. Probably vacations and shopping and all the ways she liked to appear wealthier than she actually was. Then she'd made the catastrophically stupid decision to invest most of her savings in some pyramid scheme one of her coworkers had roped her into, essential oils or cryptocurrency or whatever the financial predators were pushing that year, and lost everything. She was drowning in debt, behind on her mortgage payments, and facing foreclosure within 90 days if she couldn't come up with $40,000. The house that had been in our family for decades, the house Dad had worked overtime for years to pay off, was about to be taken by the bank because of her financial recklessness and pride. I sat in my office looking at the foreclosure notice I'd found in public records, and I felt this cold, calculating part of my brain click into gear, the part that had learned to survive without mercy or sentiment. I called my bank and my financial advisor, had several long conversations about real estate investment and rental markets in Seattle, ran the numbers about a dozen different ways, and then I made a decision that would either be the most satisfying thing I'd ever done or something I'd regret for the rest of my life. I contacted the bank handling the foreclosure, expressed interest in purchasing the property, and within 2 weeks I had made an offer, cash, above asking price because I wanted to guarantee there would be no other buyers, no chance for Mom to find some last-minute solution. The sale went through in 30 days, expedited because the bank wanted to move the property quickly and I had the money ready to go. And suddenly I owned the house at 4237 Northwest 63rd Street in Ballard, the house where I'd grown up, where I'd had my first kiss on the front porch and cried over college rejection letters at the kitchen table, where my mother had looked me in the eye and called me lazy before throwing me out. The irony was so sharp it could cut glass. I hired a property management company to handle the logistics because I didn't want to deal with it directly, told them I wanted market rate rent for the area, which was roughly $3,000 a month, triple what Mom had been paying on her old mortgage, and instructed them to send her a formal lease agreement with 60 days to decide whether she wanted to stay or move out. I didn't tell her I was the new owner, just let the management company handle all communication. And I waited. Jennifer thought I was being cruel when I told her, said I was stooping to Mom's level, but she hadn't been there that morning in the kitchen, hadn't felt the specific kind of annihilation that comes from your own mother deciding you're worthless. This wasn't about cruelty, it was about consequences. About showing her exactly what I was capable of when she wasn't there to undermine me, about proving that the lazy daughter she'd thrown away had become successful enough to literally buy her entire life out from under her. The call came on a Thursday afternoon. The property manager contacted me to say the tenant, my mother, was requesting to speak with the owner about the rental terms. I told them to set up a meeting at a neutral location, a coffee shop in Fremont, and I showed up in my best business casual outfit. carrying a leather portfolio that probably cost more than Mom made in a week, looking every inch the successful professional she'd told me I'd never become. She was already there when I arrived, sitting at a corner table looking small and tired in a way I'd never seen before. Her hair had more gray than I remembered, and there were lines around her mouth that seemed deeper, etched by stress and probably the realization that she'd destroyed everything through her own choices. When she looked up and saw me walking toward her, her face went through this rapid sequence of emotions, confusion, recognition, shock, and then something that might have been fear, and I felt a surge of satisfaction so intense it was almost frightening. "Abigail?" she said, her voice uncertain, like she couldn't quite believe what she was seeing. "What are you doing here? I'm supposed to be meeting with the property owner." I pulled out the chair across from her and sat down, placed my portfolio on the table between us like a barrier, and smiled, not warmly, not with any affection, just this cold, professional expression I'd perfected in client meetings. "You are meeting with the property owner," I said. "I bought the house, Mom. I own it now, and the rental terms are non-negotiable." The color drained from her face and she just stared at me, her mouth opening and closing without sound, trying to process what I'd just told her. "You bought my house?" she finally managed, and her voice came out as barely more than a whisper. Where did you get the money?" I leaned back in my chair, completely relaxed, completely in control. "From my lazy freelance career," I said, letting each word land with precision. "Turns out being a graphic designer is quite lucrative when you're not being told you're worthless every day. Funny how that works." She flinched like I'd struck her, and I watched the realization wash over her. The understanding that the daughter she'd thrown away had not only survived but thrived, had become successful enough to literally purchase her childhood home and hold her mother's housing security in her hands. "Abigail, please," she said, and now her voice was shaking, pleading, "You can't do this. Where am I supposed to go? I can't afford $3,000 a month on my salary." I shrugged, the same casual, dismissive gesture she'd used on me that morning a year ago. "That's not my problem," I said, using her exact words back to her. "You're an adult. Figure it out." I watched the impact of those words hit her, saw her eyes fill with tears, and I felt absolutely nothing. No guilt, no sympathy, just this cold satisfaction that she finally understood exactly what she'd done to me. "I know I hurt you," she said, her voice breaking. "I know I was wrong to kick you out like that. But this is too much, Abigail. This is cruel." I stood up, gathering my portfolio, preparing to leave this conversation and this relationship behind for good. "No, Mom," I said quietly. "Cruel is telling your daughter she's lazy when she's working herself to exhaustion. Cruel is throwing her out with 48 hours notice when she's at her lowest point. Cruel is weaponizing her dead father's memory to make her feel worthless. What I'm doing is just business. This is market rate rent for this property in this neighborhood. You have 60 days to decide if you want to sign the lease or find somewhere else to live, just like you gave me 2 days." I walked away from that table, from that coffee shop, from the woman who gave birth to me but never really saw me, and I didn't look back because there was nothing left to see. She didn't sign the lease, couldn't afford it obviously, and she moved into a small apartment in Renton with a roommate she found on Craigslist, called me crying a few times, begging me to reconsider, but I never answered, never engaged, just let her messages pile up in my voicemail like unpaid bills. I kept the house as a rental property, found a nice young couple to lease it. use the income to fund my retirement account, and take vacations to places I'd only dreamed about when I was sleeping on Jennifer's couch. Sometimes I drive past the house on my way to visit friends in Ballard, see the cherry trees blooming in spring or covered in snow in winter, and I feel nothing, no nostalgia, no regret, just the quiet satisfaction of knowing that I took the worst thing she ever did to me and transformed it into proof of everything she said I could never be. My mother calls me once a year on my birthday, leaves messages saying she's sorry, saying she wants to make things right. But sorry is just a word, and wanting doesn't undo what was done. Some betrayals are too fundamental to forgive. Some wounds never heal. They just scar over and teach you who people really are when you're not useful to them anymore. I learned that blood doesn't guarantee love, that family can be the people who hurt you deepest, and that sometimes the best thing you can do is survive them, surpass them, and let them watch from a distance as you become everything they said was impossible, not for their approval, but for the simple, devastating proof that they were wrong about you all along.